Hi, this is Chris of Wilson Live Sculpture. Thanks for watching this video and subscribing to my YouTube channel. I am going to demonstrate painting techniques in this video. This is a continuation of my first video in which I demonstrated how I'm improving these eagle sculptures, these miniature sculptures, and also I've improved this life-size elf owl by adding moss. So I'm going to first show an example of a nuthatch and show how I'm improving it, and I'm also going to demonstrate how I paint. Okay, different methods using acrylics, showing things I've learned all over the years since going to art school, studying color theory, and just being a professional artist for the last 30 years. Acrylics are very versatile. I do use oils for further enhancement of the sheen of the bird. That's optional. But this is a free video in which you can learn from me, learn what you need to get started painting. It's kind of a beginning video, but I'll have advanced techniques as well, just to show you what you need to get started and how you can improve your work. So I talked about my work and how I just came back from a show, and I'm trying to get ready for another show. And this show raises money for conservation. One thing that's very important with my work is to depict wildlife in their natural settings and the importance to conserve our natural resources, especially birds and other wildlife that I love and many others love too. And eagles have a wonderful comeback story in the United States. I discussed that in my first video, but let's talk a little bit more about painting here. For acrylics, all you need is some starter sets. Minimum Acrylics, this is a company, it's M-I-N-I-M Acrylics. They're made in Spain, and they're tiny little bottles, and they work quite well for getting started. You can get a chromatic wheel 1 or 2. You can also buy simple craft paint, like at a Michael's, and they dry pretty flat. My preferred paint of choice is Liquitex acrylics, which I use primarily in washes because it does get a little bit shiny. But you can also use Chroma. This is pretty flat drying, although I've had problems with the new paint, a lot of fillers, and it's a little too shiny for the sheen on my birds, but still good for habitat. And then finally, Josanya is an acrylic gouache. Acrylic is a type of watercolor. Gouache is a type of opaque watercolor, and it kind of flattens the acrylic because it has the gouache in it, and that is a great paint for also the sheen of the birds and the habitat. So I will mix different brands of paint. That's Josanya, Liquitex, Chroma, Minimum Acrylics. Okay, those are some just to get started. And a lot of the different variety of craft paints. This is folk art. Okay, you can get grass green, you can get olive green. So I'm going to demonstrate different greens. You'll want you can mix any color with red, yellow, and blue. Okay, so I do like red to complement the green, so the green's not straight out of the tube and very, very bright. So you don't have to buy all these different shades of green. If you know how to mix colors, you can mix them yourself. And so I can show you a little bit of that in this video. However, I am under time constraints, so I'm going to paint as you're watching this video, so you can learn from me. But first, okay, we talked about paints. First, I'm going to demonstrate other things you need. Obviously, paint brushes. For acrylics, you don't need any fancy sable hair or camel hair, anything from animals. Just these synthetics work well. Flats and rounds. Doesn't have to be expensive. This is Artist Loft. It's nice and soft. Just dropped one. This was a favorite brush. Unfortunately, it's not available. You might be able to find it online. It's Low Cornell Ultra Round. And they used to point up to a very sharp tip, but I've used these for years. And so paintbrushes have their life. It's important though to always dip them in water so they're wet with acrylics, because acrylics will ruin the paint brushes. So always keep your brushes wet. One trick is to dip it in water first before you put it in paint, and also try not to get the paint all the way up into the furrows of the brush that's close to the handle, because that paint notoriously dries out fast, and you're not really using that paint anyway. You're usually using the paint towards the end of the brush. Although sometimes you store the paint there. I have some dried paint in this piece, in this one. So when washing brushes, just use some dishwashing liquid and water. One reason I like acrylics is they're non-toxic. They do have chemicals in them, so if you do spray, airbrush, and I do a little bit of that for habitat, do use a mask and be more careful. And other videos I will show how to thin them. And you're welcome to follow my website, wilsonwildlifesculpture.com, and I have instruction available there where I can show you all the tricks and give one-on-one lessons. So this is a general lesson about color, painting, and the materials you need, and I will demonstrate after I just explain more of these materials. So back to brushes, some rounds are good, some flats. Okay, small brushes are good for these miniature size. The bigger the subject matter, the bigger the brush in general. You'll also want a palette knife. Okay, this is for mixing the colors. Makes it a lot easier, and it's not necessary. You can use a brush. I would use a cheap brush though, because it's hard on your brushes. And you'll want some paper towels as well handy, because you're always wiping paints and it could create a mess. And then finally you want a palette to paint on, okay, a surface to mix the paints, that is. And I, just like my wood sculptures, I don't like to waste anything. I don't cut any trees down. Same thing with palettes and plastic. I will reuse, this is from a microwave dish, 2019, so I've had it for a while. Basically, I ask people, okay, you're gonna throw that away? I'll wash it and I will, save it. I prefer those with lids on the plastic containers, but they're harder to find these days. The companies have found ways to make their products cheaper and cheaper. Although yogurt containers still have plastic lids, most of them do. And so those are good. They're just a little bit harder to work on. These are small little yogurt containers. And even these are what I primarily use. In fact, you can see how much I've used it over the years, because they don't make them with the tops anymore. So I've saved the tops, and I don't reuse the palette, but well, I will use. It depends on how much I use it. But I do like to reuse and recycle. So the other thing you're going to need, besides a palette, and you can buy palettes as well. I just prefer the plastic, and I like the lids because they will stay dry. And acrylics will dry out within about 15 minutes if you don't apply water over it or a cover. Okay, and especially the cover that keeps the water in. And I can keep the acrylics in a cupboard. I can keep them wet for about 2 weeks. And sometimes that's how long it takes to paint, actually a month. With oil paints the same way. Oil paints though, the advantage is that they're not going to dry out as long, and you can blend them. But I can show you that with acrylics, and I'm going to demonstrate that in this video, how to do washes, how to blend, how to mix colors, okay, and talk about the hues and intensity and the value of the colors. So those are 3 ingredients that we're going to go over. And you can learn this by looking at a color wheel, or taking color theory classes or instruction. And I'm lucky to have gone to art school and learned all these, and I've studied under a lot of artists with various different techniques. And all artists are very different in how they apply colors and paints. So this is just how I work. It's not necessarily how you have to work. I have changed my style, in fact, over the years to make it easier on myself. I've learned lots of tricks, and painting again is one of my fortes. So here's a little elf owl. You can see all the details in it. Although I don't prefer to handle my work with my hands, because if you have oil on your hands, it can get your work shiny. The acrylics can get shiny very easily. So I like to handle my work with plastic. But in this video, I'm going to demonstrate how to paint flowers on dogwood flower, which I'm about to show you, improving a nuthatch composition. And then I'm going to demonstrate a different technique of how I paint moss. And you can see some of the moss in some of these smaller sculptures. So the other ingredient you're going to need is water. And I'm going to get that I got it right here. I would get 2 things of water. Okay, I would fill one container with clean water and have another container where you can mix, you can just clean your paintbrush, because that's, you don't want to contaminate your clean water when, say, doing washes of paint. So what is a wash? And that's what I'm going to demonstrate first, and that is a diluted paint with lots of water. And I'm going to demonstrate that on a nuthatch sculpture. And I'll show that to you here. Okay, here's the nuthatch. Let's see if you can see it all good in the video here. Probably a little bit too, dark up here, but under the light you can see how I've done flowers and painted a bird. But I've actually underpainted with flowers. Okay, so I have the white, I've blended a yellow in the sides, and whenever you paint white, you want to have shadows and highlights. So I put in some violet in the shadows. See if you can see that. But I still have to have some green in the center of the flower. Okay, that's how a dogwood looks. Unfortunately, dogwoods are not in bloom yet, although it's getting close to spring. And so, if one of the great things about this day and age is you can watch these YouTube videos and learn, and I can just pick up reference material on my iPad. I can look up dogwood flowers. I prefer looking at things from life and painting with natural light. So this light isn't the best, but I'm using a studio light for this video. And so I'm going to simply do a Google search and search dogwood flowers, because I will get a general reference of, and I'll go to images, I just search dogwood flowers, and actually I'm going to go white dogwood flowers, because there's pink dogwood flowers and I don't want too many coming up here. Okay, and then I'll hit images, and you can see, just doing a Google search, that lots of images come up here. Okay, and so you just pick an image that looks good to you. This looks pretty good. I can see that the center of the flowers look a little bit yellow. Now there are different kinds of dogwoods, like Kusa dogwood, and I like this flower, so I'm going to visit this page, and hopefully the flower will come up nice and big, and fortunately it does. Okay, so yeah, it's kind of a yellow-green center. So I'm going to start with I've underpainted the values of my flower using black and white. Okay, now, and that was with acrylics. And I already added the violets and a little bit of the siennas, the browns on the edges. Now I'm going to paint the centers kind of yellow and kind of this green down there. But you can see these aren't right out of the tube. These are muted colors. So how am I going to get that color? Well, you have to mix the colors. So I'm going to keep my reference out here. Again, it would be better to find dogwood flowers and cut them and then have them right here as you're working. Working from life always is better. Okay, but that's not always possible, okay? So I'm an artist. I try to mix all my colors, and that's what I'm going to do here. I'm going to use my palette and try to mix this. Let's get some colors out. I think the minimum acrylics might work well for this. And they have different yellows in it. I think this lemon yellow is a good one because it's nice and light. The deep taxi yellow is too deep. Now this is the chromatic, this is the hue of the color. Okay, yellow is a primary color, red, yellow, and blue. Okay, you really can't, you can change the tint of yellow by making it warmer by adding orange, or making it cooler by adding green. And that's what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna make it green. So keep that open. So I'm gonna use lemon yellow, basically just a light yellow. Hansa yellow is another name of a hue. There is also cadmium yellow. That's pretty intense. I might just do a tad bit of cadmium yellow though. So what I'm gonna do is get my palette out, get some water in my brush here, get it on the palette, and I'm gonna use a tad bit of the cadmium yellow hue, just because I like to brighten things up a little bit. Not much of it though. I'm just gonna wash the paint on. A wash is very little pigment, so you don't need much pigment to make this work. Now I'm gonna put a little bit of yellow next to this color, I mean lemon yellow next to the cadmium yellow. Shake the paints up really good if they're in a bottle. I find they're less saturated when they're in a bottle though, when they are in a tube. Okay, so, and also I use professional paint, and that there is a difference between beginning artist grade paint and professional paint. It's how much pigment is in the tube itself, and that's very important because paint companies, they're trying to sell to beginners, and that's fine getting started with the set, but you'll find the professional paints look better and they last longer because they have more pigment in them. But it's okay getting started. You don't have to have a lot of pigment. A lot of nature is not that saturated in color. It's kind of muted tones. So some of these little containers of paint are fine. Okay, so I've got my yellow out. Keep this open. I'm going to add a little bit of green. And it would be nice if I had a little bit of red, because then I could mute the green. And yeah, I've got some here, just a tad bit. This is carmine red. There's also cadmium red. Oh, okay, there's Naphthol crimson red, and I like that red. But I'm going to mix this out a little bit here. I'll show you my palette here once I get the paints on here. But it's important to lay the colors out and keep them fairly wet. And try to always put out a little bit more. I'm not actually doing that much for here, but I'll put more pigment out later. Okay, then you need the green. So I could mix green with just yellow and blue. Okay, that's one way to go about it. I don't have too many blues out here. Oh, by the way, the minimum acrylics has a thinner, which if you want to airbrush the paint, it comes with it. Okay, I think it's alcohol based. Okay, so it is. I don't like alcohol based paints that much. I generally use water based paints, but alcohol based is a new kind of thing. An oil base is very different. You would need turpentine or a thinner for that. But acrylics and watercolor, gouache, you want water. Okay, so I'm using acrylics and a little bit of gouache mixed in. Sometimes I do that to control the sheen of the paint, mixing opaque watercolor. That's gouache, and that's what Josanya has in it. It's artist gouache. To get a velvet matte finish. Okay, so I'm gonna mix a little green, and in this case, I'm gonna cheat. I'm gonna use this Lush Foliage Green, because hit this page back again here and see my images. And yeah, it's very muted green, and this foliage is not that big. I'm just gonna squeeze some out after shaking it. Okay, let's get mixing some color on here. I'm going to load up 2 brushes, one with a little green and one with a little bit of yellow. I'm going to mute, what I'm doing here, let me show you this closer here. Okay, so here's my palette. Okay, I got the yellow there, and I've got the green. I'm actually adding a little bit of red to that green to make it muted, because the shadow areas always appear less distinct, and I don't want it straight out of the tube. It looks too artificial. Although the foliage I've used it straight out of the tube before. It's not as bright as a lot of colors are. Okay, so let me show you how I do this here. So I got 2 brushes loaded up. Where's my yellow brush here? I put things down and forget where I put them. So I'm going to show you a little closer here how I do this. Try to move this a little bit closer. There we go. Okay, I'm looking at our reference material, and basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to add yellow to the top of this. Ooh, that's not very distinct at all. I could use more pigment. Okay, and I'm going to do them all to save on time, because I have to travel tomorrow to my shows. Keep this open. I would recommend just doing 1 flower at a time getting started though. Hopefully you can see that okay. Okay, the fact that I paint it in black and white, this is called a wash coat. The fact that I paint it in black and white, it's really looking actually pretty good. Although I see a greenish cast. So I already have my shadows in there because I paint it in black and white. And that is a technique that developed in the Renaissance. And that's a trick a lot of the master artists do, which I learned at art school about 30 years ago. That's how I really make my sculptures pop with color. That is showing the value of the color. Okay, now I'm adding some of this muted green in here. Kind of going over the darker areas, but keeping that green highlight, that yellow highlight. And I painted that way using black and white. I painted highlights, which are white, and shadows, which are dark. And I used not just complete black, but kind of a muted black to get the shadows. So it's a little bit softer, not as harsh as straight out of the tube. You can make a black with ultramarine blue and burnt umber. That's a great way of making a black. So but take a look at that. See the flowers here, the detail. Okay, I thought the sculpture. I've been looking at it all weekend at a show called Cebu last weekend, and the piece didn't sell. But keep this open a second. I thought, how could I improve it? And my fiance was looking at it, and she says, "Why don't you add flowers?" And I think she's right. I think it looks good with flowers because it helps brighten the piece. And I think I'm pretty close to the reference material there. If you can see my reference there, probably not. Okay, so here is the piece again. Here's the whole piece, and tell me what you think in the comments. If you think it is an improvement with the flowers, or if you saw in other videos which I demonstrated how I finished the base, if you liked it better before. But it is a wall hanging sculpture. It'll hang on the wall just like I'm holding it, and I'm pretty happy with it. I'm going to add a little bit more intense green in here. I added, but this is what I'm going to do next. I am going to demonstrate how I make this moss, how I paint the moss. I already demonstrated how I paint it in another video, but I am going to show how I paint the highlights and the shadows. Okay, that's just made with wood shavings, which I demonstrated in my last video. So look that up at Wilson Wildlife Sculpture, and I appreciate your support. But you see how it makes it pop with color? Otherwise it would be also brown. Okay, so I could add a little more green in here, or what I might just do is let this dry and see how it looks and do a second coat. Okay, because the advantage of acrylics is you can paint in layers. And I just layered a coat of yellow, very light yellow, with a little bit of green over in it, so that you could see that value I put in before. by painting it in black and white. And by white, I just use gesso, okay, because that's a nice flat drying white. Okay, let's look at these other pieces now, since that's about done. We're going to mix a little bit more color on these pieces. I don't need to look at my reference material for moss. I just kind of make up the moss in my head. But the important thing when painting sculpture is just like a two-dimensional painting. Think about a light source and where light source the sun is coming, so that you can emphasize the value and make your work appear more three-dimensional. Okay, it already is 3D, but to make it look more interesting rather than flat. A lot of painters, they work from photographs and their work looks flat. However, if they paint the light source, their work looks magically 3D. Now they have to paint an illusion of space. Okay, you can paint distance showing aerial perspective, and that is colors appear less distinct, less detailed, and more gray-like in the distance. In three-dimensional work, that's not the case. We are dealing in real space. However, by painting a light source and painting value and getting different hues, you can make your work really pop. But so we talked about hues, and that is the bright color. That's the name of the hue is the name of the color brand. So I'm going to put out some more yellow. This is the cadmium yellow, make it pretty bright in some areas. I don't want to overpower the birds, so just squeeze it out of the tube, and I'll use a palette knife for that. So a lot of y'all have been talking about or asking for painting advice. So this is probably going to be one of my longest videos. So the longer you stay with me, the more tips I will give. And again, I love painting. I think I've been, people have said that that's what they like about my work, how I paint. I love to carve too, but I know a lot of people carve, but they don't paint their work. And that's fine, but with some tips and advice, I'd be glad to help you. Okay, so I'm going to mix a little minimum acrylics here. This is Taxi Yellow. These are just the hues, the name brand of the paint. And yellow is a primary color, so okay, I didn't mix it that good, actually. So what happened? A lot of the it's not coming out that well. Some paints, some I'm gonna have to mix more of this yellow in here. Some hues are better than others. Some paints are better than others, and I like this Josanya yellow. These paints are made in Australia, and I can make a tube of paint like this last 20, 30 years. I even have tubes of oil paint that last 40 years. So I don't use a lot of paint in my work. I tend to use a lot of water and gradually build up the surface. And that's when I would do painting this moss. First I'm making yellow, and that's gonna be my highlight. I could use white, and in fact I used to paint the moss, a little tip here, just like I painted the flowers. I used to paint my moss and birds in black and white, but sometimes they look too harsh, too striking. So now I've gone back to just painting first with a highlight color, and I am going to mix yellow is my highlight. I need more water with this. Use clean water. And in fact, make sure you dip your old brush, the paint you were just using, like I told you from the start. Try to clean it a little bit as you're working. Okay. Always keep your brushes wet, or they will ruin the brush. And I can make my brushes last many years because of that. Okay, so I've got a good yellow here, and then I will add a good green over it. let's see, I'm going to add just a little bit of yellow for these highlights because I see yellow in the owl's eyes. So let's look at this one up close. Let's make sure you're seeing it okay here. Might get a little bit closer so you can see the details. Here we go. Okay, so this was all done with wood shavings. Okay, and I'm going to apply this pretty thin. This isn't a wash though. Okay, this paint is a little bit, is kind of like whole milk. Okay, before it was even thinner than whole milk. It was like skim milk. Okay, so I want it thin enough to go in the grooves. And I'm just kind of painting the top of the moss because I'm envisioning the light coming up here and the shadows kind of down at the bottom of the moss. So it's going to really pop this moss and make it look 3D, especially when I add the shadows. Now, the advantage of picking colors next to each other in the color wheel, when I add the green, it's going to really work well with yellow because they are next to each other in the color wheel. So I'm taking advantage of that. Okay, and let's paint a little bit. This is a little bit more in the shadows, so I'm just going to put a little bit of here. Some of the moss comes off. I demonstrated how I glued it and how I put it on in my last video. And this is kind of one of my trademarks of my piece. You're welcome to copy me. I like being original. I came up with this myself. No one taught me. Okay, this is going to be shadowed areas underneath the talons. Okay, that's going to make it pop because they're already kind of a yellow-orange. See, you can see that okay, yeah. So I painted the highlights there. I'm going to go ahead and paint some of my eagle, the small little eagle. So I see yellow in its bill. Okay, that's more of a yellow ochre. But I'm going to just paint a few little highlights here and there. Now you can do them all at once. Now I just got paint on myself here. So that's what a paper towel is for. First mistake. And that happens. No big deal. I have to put that piece back a little bit more. And let's work on eagle up here. See if you can see that okay. Yeah, so it has a good batch of yellow here. What the problem with this piece was, and why I'm adding more moss, is the base was just so brown. It just blended in with the eagle. So by adding some color, I'm going to really pop the eagle. I don't want it to be too distracting though. Make sure you can see all that. So I don't want it to be too overpowering. That's a better word than distracting. So yeah, being overpowering is distracting. But if I repeat the yellow throughout, it should look good. The eye should follow around. Okay, so that is enough of that sculpture. Let's work on the golden eagle. So I get all the highlights in here. Got a little bit of water on the wood base. That's not good for the wood. It has an oil to protect the wood, but just wipe it off. You make mistakes. So the eagle, there it is. I think I just add a little moss down here to help pop it because otherwise it's very, very brown. And I'm going to just show a little bit of earth. Now I already have some moss up here. I didn't highlight it very much. You can see the moss there, kind of a muted green. But I'm actually going to go back and highlight a little bit more. That's called dry brushing because right now I don't have much paint on the brush and I'm just kind of skimming over the highlights. But this consistency is whole milk. And when I dip it in the water, okay, I got a little bit on the walnut. That's not good. Probably using a little bit of a large brush. It'd be better to use a smaller brush to get started so you don't make mistakes. I like to brace my hands sometimes by putting my pinky here, and that way I can get more control. But I'm just kind of, there's different ways to paint. You can use finger like this, you can use your wrist, or you can lock your arm and do your whole arm. Okay, there's different ways to control a brush so you can gain more dexterity with your hands. You get hand coordination, hand-eye coordination. There you go. So I think I got enough highlights there. Now I'm going to add some green. Yeah, I'm going to add just some of these greens. This is just that grass green. It's folk art. Make sure I mix it up real good here. I could make it bright, like I could add this apple green. Any green right out of the tube, or just mix a little bit of blue with the green with the yellow I already have, and that would work. In fact, let's try that, because it would be a lot easier to show you. Let's see. So I got different kind of blues. Prussian blue, I think that is each ultramarine blue. Yeah, Prussian blue is very intense usually. And ultramarine blue. Okay, that's the chromatic wheel by Minim. So we'll try a little bit of that. I'll just lay out the blues and see how they look. It's just important to mix them really good. Otherwise, what happened before, I haven't used these paints very much, and a lot of filler came out, and that's what's happening. So they came all the way from Spain. You got to just squeeze them a little bit and knead them. Let's see if this comes out a little bit better. Okay, finally I got some good blue to come out, and that's the Prussian blue, which I think is phthalo blue. It's very intense. But I've seen blues more intense. So that with a little bit of that green, I should be able to get the right pigment I want. Okay, yeah, I'm liking this. So here we go. See what I'm doing here? I'm actually adding a pretty intense green because moss gets pretty bright. Okay, I'll later dull that down. I'm going to add more water here. Maybe add a little bit of that grass green. Always keep your paints wet. Okay, remember they will dry out in like 15 minutes if you don't have any water on them. Always keep your paints wet, or put a top. Keep them wet ideally, and put a top on it as well. But however, I'm working here, so I'm not gonna put a top on it here. Okay, so let's go back to the first one, the owl. Okay, these paints, they could be drying a little bit, but that's okay, because I am going to add the green right next to the. Okay, let's make sure you can see it. Okay. Here we go. Okay, you can see how I'm adding green right next to the yellow, making it pretty intense. In fact, it's too intense for my taste. To me, it looks a little unnatural. Moss can look this bright though, but I am going to tone it down a little bit, and I'll show you how I do that if you stay with me. I could add a little more green to this color, some red to the green, and that would definitely make the green tone it down. Did it again. I got paint on my hand. Difficult to demonstrate and work at the same time here. And the more you paint, the more control you'll get in just feeling the paint. Again, I'm not a sloppy painter. I'm pretty neat. People paint all different styles though. Okay, let's go back to the eagle. You can see some of this here. I'm going to add some of that same green here. Again, I wanted the eagle to pop here. I want the eagle to really look good here. Here's the whole eagle. Okay, and then see it's too yellow behind it now. So I'll tone that down a little bit. Add some of these greens. I'm using more of the grass green here. It's okay if you get a little bit of green on the green looks good next to its feet here. So I'm dry brushing some of the green actually on the branch. So first I just saturated the moss with the green, but dry brushing, now I don't have much paint on the brush, and I'm just kind of going over some of the highlights of the branch because I want it to contrast with the eagle. I don't want it to be the same color as the eagle, and right now it's too much the same color. So I'm liking that. That's looking pretty good behind the eagle. It kind of makes it pop. Looks like it's in the American Northwest, where lots of moss hangs from trees. So there we go. Okay, yeah, I'm liking that. I think it looks good. I'll add some darks there. Now I'll work on the bottom of the owl, the eagle. There's the base. Need a little more water here. Constantly kind of use water and dilute the paint. Now, I did not seal this wood. Okay, I will seal the birds and paint and then prime them with gesso, and that is a great ground or surface to paint on. This surface, just being wood shavings, unsealed, the wood the paint just saturates right in the wood. So it's going to dry. Acrylics dry a little bit darker than they appear on your palette. Okay. So I realized that, and I realized I can always go back and do another coat if I need to. But I'm liking the way this looks. Let me dry brush a little bit more green to make it a little more cohesive throughout the composition. So I'm looking at the eagle, looking at up here. I'm thinking, okay, I like it up here. Let's try to tie this green in down here. Paint some of the highlights over it. If I don't like it, I could sand it right off. Now I have some metal grasses here I made, because that helps green it up a little bit. And I'm gonna have to repaint some of that because I can see some of the bare metal there. I'm gonna use grass green for that. Although I do have some yellows in there. You wanna mix it up. I have some brown on it, some yellows. There we go, make that brighter. Even these leaves could be brighter. They're a little bit too dull. Maybe add a little bit of yellow highlights. You can always go back and improve the work. Make it pop. Give it some pizzazz. So I hope you're learning here from me, and if you do find value, I appreciate you liking and commenting on my videos, as well as subscribe to my channel. I appreciate your support. Painting is fun to me. Try not to be intimidated. You know, because you can always paint over it, or you can take it off and start again. You can use denatured alcohol to remove paint, acrylic paint, or in this case, you can also sand it off the base, the wood. So going back to the owl, I think I need to add more green back here. I'm being careful. I'm trying not to get it on the walnut base itself because I like I like the color of the walnut, and I don't really want to get the acrylic paint on this base. So I'm painting very carefully here, and I need to switch to a smaller brush. Now some of the moss just came off. That's fine. That happens. I think it's a little bit too intense in some areas, but stay. I'm going to show you how I fix that. But we're going to go to the eagle, the last one, and you can see I'm working on 3 of them together because I've got a show, and the show is in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and it's sponsored by NatureWorks, which is a nonprofit organization. And we are selling artwork to raise money for conservation. They have lots of projects throughout Oklahoma and some surrounding states. And also they give youth scholarships, up to $20,000 in youth scholarships for youth in an art competition. And the students can enter the competition in high school, and they can win the scholarship money, and it's pretty cool. They have to have a message with their work though. So usually it's wildlife, and they have to write an essay as well as have a concept with their work. So they actually have a painting or a sculpture, and I mean, there are a lot of cool pieces. And if you stay tuned, I'll try to show some of that student work as well as the professional work of that show this coming weekend to my audience here on YouTube. So I appreciate you following me here. Okay, so this definitely pops the piece. I'm going to add a little more yellow to some of these highlights. So there's my palette again. Okay, I think some of my moss on there before was too not bright enough. But I'll see how it looks when it dries. It's going to dry a little bit darker. Right now it is a little bit too intense. I'll need to tone it down. Let's go into a different green here. I'm going to show you how I mix. I'm going to wet this paint real good so I can really reuse it, and I'm going to clean my brush here. Just clean it with the dirty water. Okay, and that water is getting very dirty. But I still have my clean water, which is really important. Okay, there are my waters. That's what I was doing. Okay, so take a look at what you think, how it looks so far. Okay, give me a comment.